Bob Sackendorf, the air chair here at WATR. Now on to hour 3 of a special talk of the town. Our guest host, John Murray.
Thanks, Bob. In keeping with our theme for the last couple hours, which is passion and commitment, I'm welcoming Geraldo Reyes Jr. To the show, WATR this morning. And what I hope to try and explore is his passion for his Puerto Rican identity, which he's born and raised here in Waterbury, and his work in the south end of Waterbury, his social work, has led to his election to the state legislature. And Jerry Reyes has just returned a few days ago from a 10-day humanitarian trip to Puerto Rico, and we'll discuss that a little bit later in the hour. But first, Jerry, welcome to Talk of the Town.
Thanks, John and Bob, and thank you to WATR for having me. And it's always good to be on the local radio station, and it's been quite an interesting ride.
And we're going to explore that ride. So, Jerry, you're born in Waterbury.
My father insisted that his firstborn would be born here, and my mother traveled here from Juana Diaz, Puerto Rico, and I was born here. And that was, at that time, I guess my father's thinking was it was better for me to have the better opportunities here. So he wanted me born here.
One of the real, I find, bizarre things to come out of Hurricane Maria's devastation of Puerto Rico was this incredible lack of awareness that Puerto Ricans are, oh, by the way, they're Americans. So it wasn't coming here that you were going to be born American. If you had stayed in Juana Diaz, you were born American, correct?
That's correct, John. And it is a misnomer that a lot of people really don't make the connection and don't understand that for over 100 years Puerto Ricans are Americans.
So when you're growing up in the south end of Waterbury, or was it?
Yes.
Or is it in downtown?
The south end, downtown. It's downtown.
So just share with us what you can, some of your from your recollections of growing up in Waterbury, a very ethnic city that's been described as not a melting pot but a salad bowl, where the Italians could be lettuce, and the Irish are a tomato, and everyone stays separate and distinct. That the neighborhoods were very separate and distinct. And early on, were you raised in, was it a Hispanic community?
That's a great way of identifying it. So I grew up on a couple of addresses. The Phoenix Avenue, right behind the Waterbury Yukon branch, was a series of homes, and that lower piece there was a Puerto Rican neighborhood, up to Kingsbury, which then turned into an African American neighborhood. The Puerto Ricans pretty much congregated between the I-84 on South Main Street, the I-84 bridge, all the way down to about Washington Street, Washington Avenue down there. That was pretty much a Puerto Rican neighborhood, and prior to that, it was a French Canadian neighborhood. Hence, you had the St. Anne's Shrine down there. And then the other big pocket of Puerto Ricans back in that era, which we're talking about the 60s and 70s, was Baldwin Street. And that was an Irish neighborhood, and Lithuanian, and it was in transition with Puerto Ricans. So I grew up in three distinctly different neighborhoods, but all had strong Puerto Rican influx.
Did I-84, did that carve right into the Puerto Rican neighborhoods and split it up?
And better known as urban renewal, my second home, which was 10 River Street, is now the base of the bridge on Baldwin Street. It gutted right through the neighborhood, and it took out the lower part of Baldwin Street, and so that whole landscape looked different. When I was young, the I-84 went over us, and now I-84 goes under because Baldwin Street's an overpass.
So when you were growing up back in, so you came here in the late 50s, right?
In 59, 60.
59, 60. So was there a substantial Puerto Rican community here?
I would say, John, that it was small because they didn't even have their own church yet. So the forming of St. Cecilia's, which was housed on Scoville Street in the old German church. That I remember when St. Cecilia started. So I would say that it was the beginning of middle 50s to early 60s was a strong influx of Puerto Ricans into Waterbury.
And was the Italian community, a lot of them came from Ponte Landolfo. The Albanians are coming from a few towns and cities in Albania and in Macedonia. Was there a pipeline from Puerto Rico? Or was there a couple of towns that a few people came and then just an artery of people that followed?
The majority of the people that came here were from a small little town west of Ponce, which is Peñuelas. That's where the majority of people that I knew, big influx of folks from Peñuelas. But you had folks here from Ponce, Juana Diaz, and then going into the mountains, Adjuntas and Utuado and Ayuya.
Your beautiful wife is from
The-
Juntas.
The family is from Juntas, Puerto Rico, which is one of the sites that I visited.
Yes. So we'll get to your trip, but I want to hang out in growing up in Waterbury a little bit more. And so you spoke Spanish in your house?
Spoke Spanish for the first 6 years of my life, and started learning English in first grade at St. Mary's Grammar School.
So in a cultural neighborhood, whether it could have been Italian or it could have been Albanian or the French Canadian, is so you're totally immersed in Puerto Rican culture. So the whole neighborhood is Puerto Rican. Everyone's speaking Spanish in the neighborhood.
Pretty much, John, with a small introduction of African American friends that we had. For the most part, it was Puerto Rican.
So do you recall the difficulties of now you go to first grade and you don't know English? Was that like running into a brick wall at first?
Those are not great. Those are not my what I call feel good years. Those were very difficult, trying times. I was at a crossroad, and again, where my family insisted that the firstborn go to a Catholic school. I didn't even want to go to that school. All my friends went to public school. So
What school did you go to?
St. Mary's Grammar School, and as my sister started going to public school, it tugged on me even more because I wanted to just stay in public school like the rest of my friends and my family. So I didn't really want to be. I didn't look at it as privilege, or I looked at it as being isolated.
You're culturally isolated.
Yeah, so I said to myself, "Oh my God, this is." I had very few friends. I didn't know many people at the school, at St. Mary's School. The beauty of the going to St. Mary's School was that I could walk there, and so I enjoyed that. And you picture it today. 7-year-old kid walking by himself up East Main Street, up to Scoville Street from behind Yukon. I did it very few times did anybody walk me, and or I walked with the herd of kids that were walking up there.
And in first grade, were there other Puerto Rican kids there?
Unfortunately not. There were no other Puerto Ricans in that school for quite a few years. There was a young woman that I met, and whose family owns a jewelry store here, and it's the Perez family, and which is Onyx Jewelry, of Cuban descent, and that was the only other Hispanic person that I remember there at the time when I first got there.
I've noticed over the years of watching you interact with new families coming from various parts of the world and different cultures, you're very sensitive to the abruptness that they encounter when they arrive into America. And do you think some of that's your sensitivities from your own experience?
It could be, John, but I always know that my mother struggled when she was here, and I could tell you that there were many folks that lent a helping hand to my mother, and I saw that, and I was able to witness that and understand that as a young child. She had a Chilean friend, lady's name was Anna, who was very, very helpful to the family. And I made a quick connection. She wasn't Puerto Rican. I didn't know I didn't know where Chile was,
Yeah.
but I knew she wasn't Puerto Rican, and I knew that she had other friends that were not Puerto Rican. So I was able to see that there were folks that were able to lend a hand, if you will, and extend themselves to make people more comfortable in maybe not so good a situation.
Mm. So you've been very instrumental in the last 5 years in helping organize the gathering, first in your role in the mayor's office, and then outside the mayor's office as you continued that work, and recruiting cultural groups from Mexico and the Dominican Republic and many, many places in Central America and South America where they're speaking Spanish. Those groups weren't here when you were a kid.
No, John, the next large wave of Spanish-speaking folks are the Dominicans, and they showed up in the late '80s to
In the 80s?
In the late '80s, yeah.
Wow.
When I was growing up playing baseball as a youth in Waterbury, there was only one Dominican family here. It was the Mojica family. There were 3 brothers. They were all great baseball players. They were the only Dominican family I knew. And there may have been others, but they were the only one I knew. And I would say at that time, all the bodegas and all the Spanish stores were all Puerto Rican owned. Fast forward to today, 90% of the bodegas are owned by Dominicans.
Hmm. So growing up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood, and as the only Puerto Rican student at St. Mary's School for several years, did you feel a sense of real strong identity with Puerto Rico? That there seems to be a very powerful Puerto Rican pride in the community. Did you feel that early on, of just with your brethren in the neighborhood?
I felt that in my community at home, but not at school. At school, that was kind of squashed and was not spoken of, and we were going in different directions. I didn't speak or show any Puerto Rican pride in the school because I would have been like an oddball.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much for the community, but not for the school.
And we'll move quickly through all this, but in the '60s, when you're running around with your friends, could you go anywhere in the city, or was there places that it wasn't safe for you to go? I know the Irish and Italians used to fight with each other all the time. Was there tensions with Puerto Ricans, with other ethnic groups, or?
I would say in the '60s, John, I would say that I felt that I can go anywhere, but I didn't really, my distance was less than a quarter of a mile from the radius from the center of my house, so I was able to go to the YMCA and Boys
Yeah.
Club and stuff like that, but that was about it. I didn't really venture into other areas into the city. You fast forward into the '70s, and there was definitely tension with Puerto Rican groups and other ethnic groups in the city of Waterbury.
Yeah, that seems to be a long part of the city history, unfortunate, but true. And as you move forward now, you went to college and you got a degree in engineering, and you went to work for Sargent Manufacturing for decades, and but you continued to live, you continued to live in the South End, raise your family in the South End, which was then, was that still largely a Hispanic neighborhood then, or was it a little bit of a melting pot?
When I moved, I lived on Madison Street, which is off Baldwin Street. At that time, on that street, there were French Canadians, Portuguese, Guyanese, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and probably a few others, right on that same street.
Yeah, so you had a corporate career for several decades, and as you shared with me before, sadly you were downsized at one point. You downsized yourself, going around closing factories around the world, and you found yourself 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Your corporate life was over, and you ended up helping out with a political group in Waterbury. When opposing State Representative Alderando back then, there was some friction with David Alderando and then Mayor, he was running for mayor, Neil O'Leary. which is a complicated story, but you ended up getting very involved in politics in the 2011 race, and when Neil O'Leary won, then you got yourself a job in City Hall doing constituent service and helping out as a mayoral aide, and then you became the first Hispanic ever to work in the mayor's office. Is that correct?
That's correct, John. I just want to back up a little bit. So I've always been involved in the different political races, and I've helped organize folks for Bergen elections on a way smaller level than what I've been doing lately. But we've had some great leaders, Puerto Rican leaders from the past that were kind of in my shoes to then what I'm doing now, and I was learning from them. There's been a lot of people that helped the Bergen family and father and son, and I actually helped. I actually worked on Dave Alderando's first election run when the former State Representative Conway stepped down. So I would say that I've always dabbled in the back, if you will.
Yeah, well, we need to take a quick break, and we'll get right back with Jerry Reyes.
29 after the hour. Bob Sagendorf here at WATR. It's Special Talk of the Town. Steve Knox on vacation. Our guest host, the one, the only, the myth, the legend. He's all together. John Murray.
Well, I'm humbled with that. So we're talking with Geraldo Reyes Jr. here about passion and kind of poking around. He doesn't like to talk about himself much. He likes to talk about other people and do things. But I'm in the theme of the show of poking at Dave Howard about where his passion for writing came from, and Kevin, Zach, his passion about cleaning the river is. I think your background, Jerry, growing up in Waterbury and seeing and experiencing things that has helped lead to your advocacy to Spanish-speaking people in the city extraordinarily. Like, you were the first real Spanish-speaking person in the mayor's office, and I witnessed over the several years you were there. You were there 4 years, right?
All 4 years, yeah.
4 years is there's a line out the door practically sometimes of the Hispanic community coming and seeking help where they weren't able to find it before because of the language barrier.
Well, I think I thought that it was a brilliant and a very strong ad that Mayor-elect O'Leary when he named the Hispanic, and there was a process that we went through to come up with the name. At the end of the day, I was named to that position. But I wanted to clarify: we've had Hispanic-speaking people in the mayor's office. We just never had a Hispanic mayoral aide, and I think, as far as I know, I'm the first one. And I say that with pride, and I also say that with a little concern, in that Waterbury is an old city, and the Hispanic population is in probably 1/3 and probably one of the fastest growing groups. So I think that the need for more Hispanics involved in different public service, that need is just going to be greater and greater, and I witnessed it firsthand.
So if a Spanish-speaking city resident needed help and they went into City Hall right now, is there anyone in the mayor's office who can help them?
Not in the mayor's office, John, but in the both in that mayoral building and or Chase building across the street, there are definitely Puerto Ricans that work there that could help.
Yes.
But it would be an effort.
So now you left the mayor's office, and now you're a two-time elected state representative from the 75th District. And you're very hands-on, moving around in your community, problem-solving, doing constituent service work. And I witnessed you very involved in the fire on Lounsbury Street back in May with Victor Lopez Jr. and the Hispanic Coalition. Very involved in helping. It was largely Hispanics that were displaced by the fire, and now we go all the way to I don't know the exact date, but it was September. When did Hurricane
20? September 20.
Hurricane Maria devastates Puerto Rico, And that was several days right before we were planning the gathering. Like, you're the guy who helps me plan the gathering. So we're planning the gathering. So we're in this cataclysmic a thing that we're trying to plan, and boom comes this hurricane, and right away you knew something. You were totally following along what had happened. You have family all over the island, and that immediately the Hispanic legislators started raising money raising money at the gathering just a few days later. So if you could take us through just like a few of the steps that from the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, is that what it's called?
That's correct.
With the fundraising, with the quickly going through the school bus, the canned goods and bottled water that was collected, and trying to find a place to put it all. If you could just explain some of what took place in September and October, which were huge planning and logistical problems.
So if I can go back and frame, 2 weeks prior to September 20th, Hurricane Irma had already hit the northeast corner of Puerto Rico, and the island of Vieques and Fajardo, and those areas were already devastated. So the planning for fundraising to do something for Puerto Rico had already started when another Category 5 hurricane, Maria, hits Puerto Rico, and this one rips in from the Caribbean south right through Yabucoa, straight through the interior, and out through Arecibo, Quebradilla. So that was devastating. That right there was, from what I'm hearing from the old-timers in Puerto Rico, the worst hurricane that may have even been worse than San Felipe that happened in 1927, something to that effect. And I was listening to the old-timers tell the story, how they thought San Felipe was the worst, but I guess the fresh memory of two Category 5 hurricanes hitting it a couple weeks apart, it's as rare as it is, it did happen, and it has devastated Puerto Rico to this day. The Puerto Rican community and many folks from the greater Waterbury area have pitched in and have been very, very generous in their donations. The legislators, the Connecticut Latino legislators, set out to raise money. We had no idea what we were going to do. We didn't really have a goal or anything other than we knew we needed to raise money, because that would be the thing that people would need the most. As it proved out, in the weeks after Hurricane Maria, where there was no power, no water, no way to get gas, all the things that you could imagine that would happen happened, and so we were right on target with money being the number one need. What the community responded with was not only money, but canned goods, water, clothing, and two companies, All Star Transportation and Durham Bus, started their own campaigns, individual, separate of ours, and they were filling the bus, and which was a tremendously successful operation.
How many buses did you guys fill?
Over 25 buses were filled, and at various points, and as I said, the city of Waterbury, the people of Waterbury, and greater Waterbury were extremely generous, and money was collected, canned goods, medicines, toiletries, you name it, we collected it. Fast forward to we're sitting in these warehouses with items collected. So
first you had to find a place, just like you just said, warehouse. But I remember listening to you. You had 25 buses filled with supplies. You didn't have a place to put it.
We needed to come up with a place, and we were able to unload some of the buses right at these companies, because they needed the buses to transport the students in the morning. So we were able to unload some of them, but we were able to quickly. Victor Lopez was able to negotiate and find a place with at the Chiquina Church on North Main Street, and Pastor Reyes lent us a whole floor. And we unloaded every single one of those buses there. And not only did we unload those buses, but we also, more trucks kept coming with stuff. So we had hundreds of pallets of water and hundreds of pallets of canned goods and so on and so forth.
It's a logistical nightmare for you and Victor Lopez to try and, the two of you pretty much were left with the task as community leaders trying to problem solve. All right, so the community has donated so much stuff and poured themselves out, but now what? How do we get this stuff from the warehouse? How do we get this to Puerto Rico?
That's where having worked in manufacturing and understanding the logistics of a supply chain came in for me. And I have to credit Victor Lopez from the Hispanic Coalition and many other people that stepped up to the plate and helped out, because there would be anywhere from 15 to 20 people in that factory trying to sort and get things organized in a fashion that we could actually ship it and make a manifest and a list that we can actually organize it and send it to Puerto Rico. I can tell you that it's a big deal. It's important that in these shipments that there's an end user and a person that's actually going to receive this, because if it goes in general as a general shipment, it will sit on the docks of San Juan for a long time. So sending it to an actual end user will actually get it out of there in less than a week. And
so if you're sending a container, if it says to Juana Diaz City Hall, like it'll almost like the post office delivering, so they'll bring it to Juana Diaz.
But there's no sense of urgency. It could be the first thing delivered to Juana Diaz, or it could be the very last thing 4 years from now delivered to Juana Diaz, and that's the difference. So I would have to send it to Geraldo Reyes Jr. at an address in Juana Diaz, and he's going to be the person that's going to be responsible for this. Case in point, the shipment that arrived in Juntas for Representative Gonzalez, we knew where that container was at all times, and that container did not sit on the docks for less than 2 days, for more than 2 days. It was gone in 2 days. That is not typical.
So it was early December that, so the events in September, there's collections quickly. Those buses were filled in early October. And then it was all the way until early December that you had raised enough money and got the trucks to unload the stuff. And I saw the great work that you guys were doing. It was like an ant colony in this dark, cold warehouse, and there was dozens of volunteers that stepped forward to help organize this stuff and wrap it, and Victor Lopez zooming around with his, what is that thing called?
Forklift.
The forklift, and loading that truck up. And then there's been 3 trucks, I think, taken off to then begin their journey to Puerto Rico. And then as the 3rd truck was being loaded, you loaded yourself on a plane and flew to Ponce.
That was that was a 3-part project that I was working on. So I wanted to bring stuff. So I brought 200 pounds worth of materials to the hometown Juana Diaz, and I wanted to go check out.
Suitcases?
Yeah.
200 pounds.
200 pounds, yeah. And I wanted to personally take care of family and friends in the Juana Diaz area, and that was my the first piece of the project. The second piece of the project was meeting up with Representative Gonzalez and other associates up in the mountains and going door to door with her container, which was a collaboration between Representative Gonzalez and the American Legion number 21 out in Juntas, Puerto Rico in the mountains. And that was the second part of the project. The third leg of the project was the Connecticut Latino legislators raised $100,000. And we wanted to start that distribution, and I started in Juana Diaz, and then we continued up in Juntas and Utuado, and Representative Gonzalez said that she would go to Jayuya, and then I had planned to go back in January when those other containers go there. So if there's anything left over, we'll be back. And I'm working on the shipments that are coming now are a collaboration with a factory out in Newington by the name of Susha, and I'm working there with Representative Angel Arce and others.
So take me through and take the listeners through, is you're going to the airport, you go down to JFK and you're flying the late night flight from JFK into Ponce. What are you feeling? You're taking 200 pounds of relief supplies, medicines and toiletries to your family and into Juana Diaz. what are you feeling? Are you nervous, or do you have any expectation of what you're going to see? Because I know the communication between you and your aunt and some of your cousins has been horrific. Like, you've spoken to your aunt maybe once, I think, and you were going to her house the first thing, and
Yeah,
she didn't even know you were coming.
that was a an interesting trip because I didn't know what to feel. I knew this was not an ordinary I'm going to the beach vacation in Puerto Rico. I didn't have that sense. I had a pit in my stomach, not knowing what to expect. Is it in total darkness? I know that none of the folks that I was going to go see had power, so I pretty much put in my head that I was going on a camping trip without a tent.
And you love to camp.
And so I pretty much had a backpack that I was self-sufficient, with candles and flashlights and some nice apparatus that Mr. Murray was nice enough to give me to help me with the dark. Interestingly enough, I did not stay anywhere where there was power for 9 days. So 10 nights I was in Puerto Rico. It was a camping trip. No food, no home cooked meals. It was very interesting. And but to answer your question, this was not a normal trip to Puerto Rico. This was let's see what we find when we land there.
So what did you find? So you land, trouble getting a rent-a-car, or was that easy?
It was not a trouble. There was no trouble getting a rental car, and part of the reason for that is because they're ultra expensive at Christmas time. So even though there weren't many people coming to Puerto Rico at Christmas time, they still kept their winter tariffs in place.
So you got a car, and Juana Diaz is just a 15, 20-minute drive away, and what did you find when you went to Juana Diaz?
I actually stayed in the airport till daylight to give my aunt a little sleeping time.
And she had no idea you were coming. So.
And she had no idea I was coming, so I waited till about 7 o'clock, and then I ventured down to the bakery, bought coffee and bread, and then I went to go see my aunt. And
What was that like?
Emotional. She likes seeing me. I think she likes to know that I'm coming first, but it wasn't for lack of not trying. It was just I couldn't get a hold of her. Yeah. I spoke to my aunt twice in the 90 days since the hurricane.
So
they
her
still
cell service just doesn't work?
No. So she's in an area that has no power. So her area is Barrio Galicia, no power. There are areas in Juana Diaz that do have power. The center is not one of them. They were closer to the airport. So it's Aguilita and Aguilita, which is in Juana Diaz, but it's closer to Mercedita Airport, and they have power.
So your aunt had no power, but what happened to her house? Her house was fine?
Her house was fine. Some leakage through the roof. So I'm finding out that concrete leaks. She has a concrete roof, but the concrete is porous, as I recall now from my engineering study. Yeah. And you just don't think of concrete leaking, but it does leak. So that there's some work that has to be done there. But her back shed was destroyed, and that's it. And then she had tin shingles from all over the place in her backyard. They flew from all over the neighborhood. As daylight approached, I was able to start seeing the blue tarps. I would now become very familiar with blue tarps. As for the next 9 days, everywhere I go, I would hone in on the blue tarps and see what damage.
Where would they get the blue tarps?
Some of them were placed there by the owners themselves in preparation. So if they had tin roofs, they knew that they possibly would not make a Category 5 hurricane, so they were prepared. Others were already placed by FEMA associates, and I was able to take many pictures of FEMA associates actually laying down the blue tarps, which be a temporary stop and measure until they actually put in the new roof.
So if we look at Juana Diaz, as the community, did you end up meeting with the mayor?
I did not. I was going to try to see him on a Saturday, but I ventured off somewhere else. I didn't think it was as important.
So is Juana Diaz in great need, or is it up in the mountains? Or everywhere?
The town of Juana Diaz is probably 85% in the dark, and they all feel blessed that it was minimal damage, and that they all said to each person that I spoke with, the greater problems are in the mountains. And even though 85% of them are in the dark, almost 100% of them have water. But it's interesting because once it gets dark, it's not what we're used to. We're used to seeing street lights on and lights in the windows.
A little eerie and creepy.
A little creepy, and then comes the annoying noise of generators, because older generators are extremely loud and noisy, and there's a courtesy that these things go off at 10, so they don't run overnight. So what that means is that you can't run your refrigerator. So, and of course, the other surprise that I wasn't thrilled with is cold showers. There's no hot water. So it's really camping. We're really roughing it here. No refrigerator and no showers. At least no hot showers. So these were shocks. I was
going in the morning.
Well, I was comfortable showering in Juanadías but not so in Juntas in the mountains. It was too cold.
Yeah.
So we went to hot water there. We warmed it up.
So we're going to take a break here, and then we're going to come right back, and Jerry Reyes is going to take us into the mountains.
As we wind down 3 hours of Talk of the Town today, Steve Knox on vacation, our host, John Murray.
Thanks, Bob. So the theme of our shows has been passion and commitment, and talking to State Representative Geraldo Reyes Jr. right now about his passion for helping Puerto Rico that was devastated by Hurricane Maria. And as we left right before the break, Jerry, you were telling us you were in Juanadías, and now you were foreshadowing that the trouble was in the mountains. So what did you see in the mountains?
So I ventured up into the mountains of Adjuntas, the towns of Adjuntas, Jayuya, and Utuado. Utuado is recognized as the worst hit area in Puerto Rico. And I could tell you that what I saw in Utuado was that's where the people I thought were a little demoralized, and I thought the only people that I saw that were as demoralized was in the town of Utuado. I met with my niece, who's a police officer in the town of Utuado, and she took us through the good, bad, and the ugly of what was going on, and she took us to a couple bridges that were out, destroyed by the raised rivers. They just moved these concrete bridges and just devastated the area, and it's already been noted, disconnected many people from actually getting back to the main to the towns. So this is the areas where the helicopters are dropping off food and so forth.
And the supplies are getting there?
The supplies were getting there by air, and still getting there by air. Excuse me. What's happening there is that as the rivers receded, people were taking their belongings and coming across, whether they were going to the airport to leave or coming closer to the actual town to stay with a loved one or a friend, to get away from the area that was disconnected. So in Utuado, I saw a lot of damage to the infrastructure, the roads, a lot of detours up there, and again, the scenario of a lot of blue tarps. In Adjuntas, it was more of the same. Adjuntas is higher in the mountains, and those rivers from Adjuntas flow into Utuado. So Utuado had the curse of not only being high altitude on the topography of Puerto Rico, so they got slammed by the hurricane, and they also got slammed by the rivers and the lakes, all dumping into the valley of Utuado. So they took it, the hit both ways. In Jayuya, it was, again, which is the highest point of Puerto Rico, the water flowed away from there, but being the highest part of the island, they had a lot of damage to the buildings and the property. John, I would tell you that my biggest takeaway from all the people I talked to, and I talked to hundreds up in the mountains, it's food and water, and that's what we deliver: trailers of water and food. And I was just getting ready to tell a short story in the mountains of Adjuntas. We were in a mountain called Agalita, and we went to go see this one woman. Representative Gonzalez and I went to visit this one woman. who lived in this house by herself. Her dad had passed away the year before, and in his bedroom, the whole roof was gone. The floor was had water damage, and I was stepping in water puddles. It was a very sad scene, to say the least. FEMA had been there. She was waiting for FEMA to come back and put a tarp on her roof and start that process of actually, being able to get some money to be able to put the roof back together.
So 3 months with no roof.
3 months with no roof. And this one woman, actually Representative Gonzalez asked her, what do you need right now? What can we help you with right now? What's the number one thing you need? And we're standing in a room with no roof and puddles on the floor. And the lady looked at us with tears in her eyes and said, I'm hungry, we need food. And we were up there with food, so we were able to satisfy her need at the time. But I think on an ongoing basis, that would be an issue. And we were taking notes of some of the people that, once we left the area, the American Legion, Post 21 would continue the service up in, I was 3,000 feet in the air where this particular woman was. So I was pleasantly surprised that I saw a lot of construction workers. I saw a lot of electricians. I saw a lot of people working on the power grids in the towns of Adjuntas and in the mountains of Utuado. And I was pleasantly surprised to see some of the places that FEMA had been to, which I was in my mind I was thinking that FEMA had not been there yet, but I was happy to see that FEMA had been there. So, it's an ongoing need for food and sustainability.
So 3 months after the hurricane, half of Puerto Rico is camping, pretty much. The half of it's still without power. There's pockets without food, but is there hope?
The people are very, very grateful for the help that they're getting from the United States of America. The United States flag is flying all over the place. People are proud that they are being helped by the United States of America. I would just like to see it faster, a little more response faster.
Yes, well, I'd like to thank my guest, State Representative Geraldo Reyes Jr. for coming and sharing his experience of going down to Puerto Rico, and thank my guests, Kevin Zach and Dave Howard, for sharing their stories, and thank WATR for this wonderful experience.